Ready.
You're listening to Midday. I'm Amanda Dixon, in for Maria Shilaos. A lawsuit against Salt Lake City over homelessness has been dismissed. The Utah Supreme Court is upholding a lower court's decision to throw out a lawsuit claiming Salt Lake City has mishandled homeless encampments. KSL NewsRadio's Heather Peterson.
In the lawsuit, Salt Lake City residents say they felt like prisoners in their own homes, afraid to go outside because of homeless encampments where they say people were doing drugs or robbing people right outside their front doors. But the courts essentially said that while the city has a general duty to protect the public, they don't owe anything to the specific residents in this suit and are therefore protected under the public duty doctrine. A Salt Lake City spokesperson says they appreciate the court's decision reaffirming that policy matters are best addressed by locally elected officials, not the courts. Still, the city says it's committed to responding to issues of chronic homelessness with compassion and accountability. Heather Peterson, KSL News Radio.
We wanted to dig more into the issue of homelessness and the reaction from that community to this lawsuit dismissal, plus several movements on the national level relating to homelessness. There's a lot going on right now. I spoke to Preston Cochran, CEO of the Other Side Village here in Salt Lake City, to get his perspective and thoughts on the true causes of homelessness.
Well, I think we really have to look at what's the problem. And the problem is it's either a behavior problem. A lot of people look at it as an asset problem. So we can't just simply expect to give people assets and hope that they'll thrive and figure things out. Instead, what we do is we focus on behavior and how do we help someone who's been on the street for so long overcome those behavior issues. And so when you think about, giving someone a housing voucher or giving someone those just assets, those cannot be solved through gifts. So someone is cold, you give them a coat. Someone was evicted from their apartment, you arrange for temporary housing. A friend's car breaks down, so you loan him yours. Those are asset problems. So it's really a clean one. When we look at our approach, we focus on behavior, and that's where a person's choices create or contribute to their pain. So if you try to solve a behavior problem by giving assets, you often perpetuate the very problem that you're trying to solve. So rather than influencing change, you foster relapse and entitlement. And the Other Side Village, we're completely focused on what are the root causes, how do we help that individual. And one of our unique approaches is we hire individuals with lived experience who have overcome that same thing, homelessness, addiction, trauma, and they're our coaches. They help individuals that are coming right off the street identify what it is that's been causing them in that homelessness status for far too long.
That is absolutely fascinating. I never looked at it that way. Is it true then, Preston, that short-term homelessness could be benefited by assets, but chronic long-term homelessness needs the approach you're describing?
That's absolutely correct. So we're not looking at, say, someone who landed in the shelter, they've got some kids, they had rising rents, and those rents forced them to choose between either paying their lease or taking their child to a doctor. So someone like that, they need help, but that individual, that family has a more straightforward problem than, say, someone who has a drug problem, who has behavior problems. When we look right now, and I think what we're seeing is a little bit of a shift in what we're seeing on the street. What I mean by that is the drug problems, the fentanyl, there's highly addictive synthetic fentanyl that's on the streets, and that's causing people to really just be in this mental health status and crisis. And so when you're looking at that, you couple mental health with addiction, you've really got to pull people out of that environment and get them into a healthy environment. And that's what we do.
So do you think that it should be illegal to be homeless?
It shouldn't be illegal, but there's got to be clear expectations for someone who is on the street. And I think that's what the recent executive order by President Trump is really trying to address is restoring civil commitment and looking at fighting vagrancy on America's street. And you've got to enforce prohibitions on any sort of open illicit drug use. You do have to enforce prohibitions on urban camping and loitering and on urban squatting. And I think we've just got to a point where it's, we look at the last last year's point in time count, it's the highest it's ever been. And so if we've been focused on the issue, but we've been fighting it in the wrong way, then we've got to do something different. And I think that's what really the executive order is aimed at.
I know that, when people come to downtown Salt Lake City, they'll sometimes see people who appear homeless on the train or sleeping in alcoves if they're in the early morning and wonder what more can be done. Sounds like more of what you're doing is the direction we should head in.
I think so. I've been doing this a while now, and what I've seen is the difference between setting up someone for short-term versus long-term. Most of our neighbors, individuals that are in the village, have been through a lot of treatment programs, 30, 60, 90-day programs, and it just didn't do it for them. They needed something more long-term. They needed something more individualized, customized for their situation. And I think, too, you look at the state's part of this, but the state's got to fix this broken market. And there are lots of fundamental flaws in the current system. And when you look at the market of itself, markets work when the receiver of a service or a product is also the payer. So when the payer and the customer are different entities need to pay attention to what satisfies the payer, not the customer, if that makes sense.
Yes, that is another fascinating angle I had not considered before. Forgive me, Preston, I'm out of time, but I know that some people are listening and would like to learn more about what you do. Is there a way that they could do that?
They could. They could visit our website, theothersidevillage.com, or our sister organization, theothersideacademy.com.
Preston Cochran is the CEO of the Other Side Village.